If you want to truly get into IT, one of the pieces of advice that it's not mine, it was actually given to me by my instructor, so I got to give credit where credit's due. So turn it into a hobby. Yeah, most definitely. I don't think there could be much better advice, when it comes to somebody that says, hey, I don't have experience and I don't know where to get it. I would definitely recommend labs.
Well, there's no way I'm going to get this job, and lo and behold, I ended up getting the job, but I was super worried. Like, I don't know this. How am I going to do this job?
We also have to understand that the employees and the staff that you might be supporting or you might be working around, they don't know the level of detail of the technology that you're working in. If you're going to get into IT and it truly is a passion, then if it can be like a hobby, and you always, like me, I'm literally, once we get done here, I'm going to go fire up Packet Tracer and I'm going to be looking at some routers because I'm a geek like that. My name's Wes Bryan. I am an edutainer, currently working at ACI Learning. You might have heard of the company ITPro. That's what I've been doing, and throughout my career over the last 15 years, in one way or another, I've been an educator, multimodal formats, tilt type training, traditional instructor led, mentored learning type training where it wasn't more of a formal class structure. Then online training and, subscrition based. So I've been doing that for, again, about 15 years now. I focus heavily on career changers. That's kind of like what my passion is because I'm a career changer. When I got into IT, I didn't know anything about IT. Well, I take that back. Let me step back a little bit. I did know some things about IT after I'd taken some classes. So I paid for some classes, got some certifications, like for instance, the CompTIA Core Foundation, A+, Net Plus, Security Plus, got that. So I started learning the language and just happened to, the same place I was taking classes, they seen that I was kind of excelling in what I was doing and asked me if I wanted to become an instructor. And, well, that's ultimately what happened. I changed sides of the desk and went from one side of the desk to the other side of the desk and just kept applying myself, to my studies. So I kind of got the best of a couple different worlds. I still got to continue my training, but I also got to work hands-on with some of the technologies as well. And then, I got to follow along with some other people that had worked there, and that was Tim Broom. And Tim Broom and Don Pizzette would go on to build ITProTV. And I went from kind of that traditional and online instructor-led training into something that pretty much you see today, and I'm continuing that on now. As we're a part of ACI Learning, I get to do skills-based training. It's something I love, but again, at the end of the day, my passion is, getting people into the industry that were like me. We're on a drive-through saying, "Welcome to such and such place. Can I take your order?" And prior to that, I was a commercial painter, and that was around 2008. And if you remember 2008. Didn't go too well with the industry, so painting jobs dried up. All pun intended. They really did. So I went back into the an industry that everybody has to eat. I was restaurant, fast food management and stuff. Been in the restaurant industry, so that's what I went back into prior to going to school. I got tired of 70 hours a week in management, not making that much money at all for what you had to do to get that paycheck. And I was blessed. The owner said, "Hey, well, I don't want you to just quit and go somewhere else and go across the street and get another one of these jobs. Why don't you go back to school?" And again, that led me into the school part. Long story short, or maybe long story longer, that's kind of where I am today.
That's such an inspiring story. And, my story getting into the field is very similar. In high school, I actually studied for my CCNA. Back in high school, my high school partnered with Cisco through the NetAcad program, and I did all that. And I got done with high school, went to college, and I think I was just too interested in girls to focus and dropped out of college after my first year. I'm like, well, I got to do something to make money. So I just got a job to put food on the table, and that evolved. And I held many different jobs over the years. I was in manufacturing for a long time, and then I became a bulldozer operator, and I was making really good money as a bulldozer operator. I was making like over $70,000 a year several years ago. But the problem I had is I was just so bored out of my mind. It sounds like a great job when you first start out, and it is a great job, but just driving forward and backwards in that bulldozer, I remember just I wasn't being mentally challenged. I wanted to do something more technical and hands-on. And I went to my wife, I'm like, I hate my job. I want to do something different. I've always had love and passion for tech. I want to get into tech. and she supported me through that journey. And I went, like what most people do nowadays, I went to YouTube to figure out what it would take to land that first entry level job, and started studying for certifications and stuff, and landed my job in tech, and the rest is history.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. So Wes, if diving right on into it, if someone told you they wanted to break into the tech industry and had no idea where to start, kind of like you and I were in the beginning, what is one piece of advice you would give them that could completely change their career trajectory?
If you want to truly get into IT, one of the pieces of advice that it's not mine. It was actually given to me by my instructor, so I got to give credit where credit's due. So turn it into a hobby. So if you turn IT into a hobby, then you're always going to be wanting the next thing. And if you can start out that way in the beginning, then, and one other thing, be willing to do the work that other people aren't willing to put in. Those two things right there will get you really, really far, that determination. And let me give you an example. Let me put it into context. So when I started going to that school, one of the reasons I got the job and they asked me, hey, do you want to be a mentor? Wasn't so much, well, it was because of what I was studying, but it was also my willingness to work. So they were doing a massive deployment. And this is before I got into actually working with the deployments and setting up the classrooms. And I think they had bought like 200 Dell Optiplexes, name your Optiplex, 745, whatever it was, 740s, they're 930s, I think they are, all the different kinds. We had a few of them, but they brought in 200 of these, and there was a whole bunch of students, myself included. I was still a student at that time. And everybody, they said, hey, would you students like to help us set up these computers? And we're like, oh, heck yeah, we want to jump in and do that. Well, everybody started jumping in to where it became more of a cluster, if you will. And I said, well, I don't know that I'm really going to be doing anything. So I went out back and I started breaking down the boxes that all the computers were coming in. And that kind of caught what would go on to be my boss and a really good friend, kind of caught his eye. He says, why aren't you taking care of the computers? I said, there's too many people out there right now. I said, I probably would be better, just doing this right here, because it's where it made sense to be at the time. So, it's sometimes you have to take that thing, that little piece of something, and you never know where it's going to come from, and just make that one thing, whatever it is, really good. And it doesn't always have to be the glorious stuff. If you can do things like that, you can go really far, and then, of course, there's still training and stuff that has to happen. But if you don't have that training yet, but you do have that mindset that says, come whatever is going to happen, may this, let the circumstances be what they'll be. I'm still going to do this, and hey, it's fun. That's a good start.
No, absolutely. One thing for me, because getting into the IT field, like with no prior background, is pretty difficult still these days. A lot of employers, just for those entry-level jobs, they still are wanting some level of experience. And it's like a lot of people get to the point where like, oh, it's the chicken before the egg, How can I get experience if no one will get me a job? How can I get a job to get an experience type of thing? And one thing I did is, while I was studying for like my initial certifications, like the CompTIA A+ and stuff, I started building myself a home lab and started documenting like the stuff I was learning. I was actually physically doing it. And it was, during my interviews, they'd be like, well, what type of experience do you have? Have you done any of this before? And I'd say, well, I actually set up my own network. I went on eBay and bought some old Cisco switches and stuff. And this is how I've been configuring them and VLANing and this and that and that. And they're kind of sometimes blown away, like, wow, you've taken that much of initiative to kind of build up some of your experience on your own. So, what I'm getting at is don't be, discouraged if you don't have a lot of experience when you're first starting out, in the field.
Yeah, most definitely. I don't think there could be much better advice, when it comes to somebody that says, hey, I don't have experience and I don't know where to get it. I would definitely recommend labs. Building up a home lab. You've got so many things, I'm sure you remember it wasn't too long ago when you really had to have all of those boxes sitting over there in the corners, and there had to be the rack and stack behind you and blinkies, and every time you turned it on, you dimmed the lights on 2 blocks over. And you're giving your power company a lot of money and making a lot of noise. Well, thank goodness today we've got things like virtualization, and a lot of it's free out there, and you can gain access to it. And I would encourage any student, an aspire, anybody that's, is looking to get into IT, and even if you are into IT already, and maybe you're in a help desk role where maybe you want to go, into a different path. I never want to say up because I think help desk gets a bad rap that way. It's a very, very difficult job, and when you look at help desk helps people maintain their productivity. So you can call it all the different variations, help desk, support desk, customer success, whatever you might call it. At the end of the day, you're helping somebody keep their work going. But, if it is somebody that's already like that and maybe you don't have the technologies, there's a lot of things out there that you can do. Download VirtualBox, go to the Microsoft Download Center. If you want to get into things like cloud, you can start an AWS subscription and they give you like so many credits to start with. I know Azure does 200 credits. There's so much documentation out there that if you don't know where to go, that's okay. But start with that home lab. Because like you said, I can build a lab and I can build a network, but I can also break a network with the best of them. And I've learned how to do it and come back from it by having those local resources, to get those skills under your belt, even if you're not in a place actively getting them as we speak.
No, absolutely. And, I remember when I landed my first job in the tech field, I was an IT support specialist. It was pretty much a help desk job. And when I first started there, I was just doing, basic password resets of Active Directory users and emails and stuff like that. But I knew I wanted to become like a network administrator. I had a huge passion for networking. It was bringing me back to, those back in high school when I was learning networking. And the organization I worked at was Cisco Meraki. Like everything was Cisco Meraki, which for those of you who don't know, isn't like your typical networking gear in an enterprise where you don't have a command line to log into. So it's all done through the cloud and a web portal. So I made it my mission to become an expert on everything Cisco Meraki. I went as far as I actually flew out to the headquarters in San Francisco because the time Cisco was coming out with a new certification for the Cisco Meraki product line. And I actually took one of their in-person cohorts at their offices. It was the coolest experience ever. But through showing that level of determination, it didn't go unnoticed. And by the time I left that organization 2 years later, I was designing the complete IT infrastructure. We were a hotel chain. And I was designing the complete IT infrastructure for all our brand new hotels we were building. We were building like 3 a year. And it was really cool because I got to see them from inception, from sitting down with the architects and the contractors during the initial meetings to when the hotel was built, finished being built, we were racking and stacking the switches on site. So, just having that level of determination and willingness to learn those skills can really pay off and, help advance your career.
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely. That's one of the things that I've always tried to do, from a training perspective, is not be afraid to shy away from the concepts that I don't know, and be willing to follow the documentation, be willing to sit there and spend the time. It's not fun sometimes, and again, I say thank goodness for virtualization because I get a get out of jail free card, if you will, the reset button. But you can do that. You can learn things like the command line. You can learn things like the language. Really, and I'm not saying programming. I could spell C++ on a good day. But I'm not, but you can learn the language of IT, and it helps you to have that conversation. And like you said, if you're building a home lab and you're already looking at the networks, by the time you get at that office where you might be doing that first interview, they can ask you a series of questions. And if you're right on par, or at least in some kind of parity with what the questions that they're asking, you're going to narrow the pool of people that you're being, interviewed against.
Let's kind of drill down into this a little bit more. So landing that first job in IT can be extremely challenging. In your opinion, what are some of the essential skills beginners should be focusing on developing to make themselves stand out to a potential employer?
I would say knowing the core foundation of computing in general is very, very important today. You have to know the language. I don't know anything about mechanics. I'll be the first thing to say. So if I hear a mechanic talking about anything that they need to fix, that it's other than filling the gas and pushing the brake pedal, I'm completely lost, right? So, by analogy, you need to learn the acronyms. You need to learn that, as you get into tech, you kind of lose the ability to speak in full sentences. You only speak in alphabet soup and acronyms, And unfortunately, it does sound sometimes like the flashcard stuff and the, stuff that's not so fun. But I think if you do that, if you learn the computing, I love A+. I really like CompTIA. CompTIA is, it's one of the things that I've specialized, for the better part of a decade. I love the A+ exams because they're not super complex. There's certainly professional level certifications, and you do have to study. But my point being is that they have a broad spectrum that they cover. And then when you start to get out of that A plus, you start getting to a more focused set of skills. Things like Net Plus. You get the networking lingo and just some basics around that. You get Security Plus, so you can tie in a low level cybersecurity focus as well. Because we have to have a culture of security today. And then past that, that's kind of like you're at a nexus point. What I would say is to do something like maybe you've done where you focus specifically on a vendor. Now we have to pick, once we've got that core that we really know kind of a broad spectrum around the language, now it's time to, figure out a pathway. You don't have to stick with one vendor, but once you know how the industry speaks, now you have to kind of say, all right, who do I want to go to? Whether, a Microsoft technology, a Juniper technology, Cisco technology, whatever it might be. You start to focus then on that type of path.
No, absolutely. And, one thing when I got into the field, I was really concerned about was, a lot of times I heard when you got into like those bigger organizations, you kind of start getting siloed off into one area. And, while I loved Cisco and everything, I definitely grew up being a Cisco fanboy. I didn't want to just be necessarily stuck just doing networking all my life. And, so I really tried to become like a jack of all trades. And I definitely found throughout the years, working for those smaller organizations, you tend to be a little bit more of a jack of all trades. And when I left my first job, well, actually my second job into the tech field to go to my current position, I was very intimidated because here I am the Cisco fanboy. I'm drinking the Cisco Kool-Aid, and I applied for a job at an ISP, and I'm all toting my stuff about Cisco and stuff during the interview. And he's like, "Well, we don't own a single piece of Cisco. We're a complete Juniper shop." And I'm like, "Well, nice meeting you." And, I felt like, I'm like, well, there's no way I'm going to get this job. And lo and behold, I ended up getting the job, but I was super worried. Like, I don't know this. How am I going to do this job? And as I'm getting ready to go for my first day, I'm talking to other people in the industry. And one thing that's just kind of rung out to me is I was told, networking is networking, whether it's Juniper, Cisco, HP, you name it. It's all the same. The command prompt might be slightly different, but once you know the core fundamental principles, no matter where you go, you're going to be able to apply those skills. And seriously, it took me maybe like a month or two to figure out the different, nuances in the command prompt to be proficient again. So, if you find something you're passionate about, that you love, and you start focusing down on that vendor, don't be scared and think you're stuck with only that vendor. You can easily pivot into another, vendor, or even another branch of that, field you're going into.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you don't want, you talk about silos. It's a great way, it's not a good thing to be a part of when it happens, but I know what you mean. And you don't want to self-silo. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself before you even get into the industry. I absolutely agree with that. Look at what it is, once you, again, starting out with that core foundation, once you get there, figure out what you enjoy. Because if you're gonna, like you said, you got to enjoy it, right? Because if you don't enjoy it, why are we doing it? And that's kind of one of the things that I follow too, as well, is that I try not to stick with any one specific thing. I try to go broad spectrum. Hey, listen, I'm a Windows person. I love my Android device, but I don't stop there. I need to see what a Chrome OS looks like. Look at Google, Workspace Admin Console. Look at, other things that just aren't in the Microsoft and the Windows world, right? You have to branch out that way, because you have to have again, back to that language and vocabulary. The bigger the vocabulary, the smaller a pool that you're being judged against. And not just vocabulary. Again, I'm not saying, it's just information. You remember everything from flashcards, because like we're talking about, experience says, it goes a long way.
I want to ask your opinion and see if you've seen this too. So from my observations in the tech field, there's a flip side of not, getting siloed into something, where a lot of people who get in the industry, they're all like, I'm going to make $100,000. I want to make $200,000. I want to make a lot of money. And from what I've observed is if you want to make those big bucks, you have to get really good at one particular thing and kind of silo out yourself off into that vertical to be able to really kind of make a dash for that cash. Have you noticed that as well? Or
I think it's going to be its level of expertise. I think, and again, I don't want to discourage anybody from going shooting. I mean, aim for the sky for sure. Yeah. But we've got to realize that those high end paying salaries, they're going to come with a lot of tenure and a lot of experience, not just certifications, but just a lot of tenure, which means you're going to, probably not only have to know the technology, but to manage people below you. And I don't mean that derogatory, but manage a crew that also knows the technology. Those higher level certifications too, it also comes with a completely, sometimes different scope too, on what level, you're interacting with, Again, you can get into some where it's the complexities behind it aren't that deep, but it's 15 miles wide, and you have to know every little intricate detail. Look at security, because when it comes to criminals, they only need one thing that's successful. You need thousands of things to make sure that they're not.
Exactly. And, one thing I do want to touch on that I think we really haven't brought up yet is, while technical skills are crucial in IT, soft skills are incredibly important. And, soft skills are your ability to communicate with others and conversate in a way that they can easily understand, have those conversations with the non-technical people. Do you believe that, soft skills are some of the most valuable skills that you can have in the tech field, for someone looking to get into the field? Absolutely.
I've taught on it every iteration pretty much of the A+, going back to I've been maybe 701, maybe even farther, and that's it. Again, I kind of go back to the training side of it. Look at what the industry's, asking for. And they included that in their objectives, and it's pretty much right out of the ITIL type library. And professionalism and communication, those soft skills, you have to have them. We cannot, for those viewers in the audience that don't know what Nick Burns, the IT guy, you don't want to be that person, right? And we also have to understand that people don't understand. People aren't going to go, or I don't want to just generically say people, but the employees and the staff that you might be supporting, or you might be working around, they don't know the level of detail of the technology that you're working in.
Nick Burns, the company's computer guy.
Again, I'm going back to the mechanic too, because I don't know anything about cars. But if I'm sitting next to a highly trained mechanic that can work on a very, very professional level sports car, and they're talking to me, the first sentence, I'm not going to know what they're talking about. And at that point, the conversation's not for me, it's for them. And that's one of the things we have. That's why I think soft skills are so important, right? You have to be able to know, how do we talk to people, right? Sarcasm. I'm the most sarcastic person you will meet. I say that, but it doesn't. You are the smartest person I've ever met. I mean it, But it really doesn't have any place in the workplace, and that's things that we got to understand. So when you're asking questions, are you asking questions in a condescending way? Or are you asking ways that are in support? Because remember, at the end of the day, we're part of a team, and if we can think that way, and the people that we're supporting, that they're part of the team as well too. So, asking things like open-ended questions, right? So you can gain more information, not asking, yes and no questions. That really doesn't help anybody around. And then providing communication and feedback is very, very important too. And I know it's a pain sometimes when you look at it. It's like, just type the password. You got the caps lock on. Yeah, it does happen. So, back to, I digress though, back to your point. I think professionalism and communication is one of the specific things that I've definitely focused on, and I focused on every single iteration. I've worked with some other people that have taught some ITIL-based courses, and you look at the things like emotional intelligence and stuff, being able to read people and stuff and working with people. I mean, those skills, again, with a desire and the tenacity to just do what it takes to, get your job done, apply yourself, and do good work. That's a successful combination.
Absolutely. Gone are the days of the basement IT department that, was in a dimly lit room that smelled like old pizza boxes and dirty socks. You know what I mean?
That's right.
IT is a customer service job, whether we like to admit it or not. And having those good customer service skills is vital. When I'm interviewing someone for an entry-level job, I don't necessarily care if they know the actual, the skills. Like, I don't care if you know how to reset an AD password, in all honesty. Well, maybe that I do a little bit, but I can teach you those skills. What I can't teach you is how to be a good communicator, a good team player. Those are skills you got to kind of come to the table with. And if you don't necessarily have a lot of experience in the tech field, one thing you can do in your interview to prove that, you are still a worthy candidate is to have great soft skills and have great communication skills. One of my favorite things to do in an interview is when I'm interviewing someone, is I'll ask them a question that I wholeheartedly don't expect them to really know. And I am the most vague about the question. And I want to see how they respond. If they're trying to ask me and fish for more answers, I'm like, nope, this is just what you have to go with. Tell me how you're going to handle this. And I want to hear how they walk me through it. And I don't care if they know how to fix it. I want to hear their train of thought. And I want to hear them say, well, I don't know that. This is how I would go find that information. And those words there, like, well, I don't know how to solve that problem. But let me walk you through how I'd figure out how to solve that problem. First, I'm going to go to documentation. Then I'm going to go to Google, because that has all the answers by all the great IT wizards. And then, that's what I want to hear. And if you can demonstrate that in an interview, I think that can go really far.
Most definitely. If you can apply a systematic approach, generically a troubleshooting methodology, and I don't care what it is, remember, it really needs to only have a few things, right? The recognition, diagnosis, and resolution of a problem. You can put any other steps with it that you want, right? I mean, I've seen 7 steps, 10 steps, right? Those 3 steps are what it needs, right? And if you can apply that, whatever that systematic approach is to get you through those 3 steps, if it's 5, back in the days, Microsoft had one, I think it was. I think even Novell had their troubleshooting model, and it was like 3 or 4, But the point being is, let's take the vendor out of it. Like you said, if this potential employee, hiree, if you will, can go through that systematic approach, can be resourceful, say, hey, I don't know it, but I'm going to exercise some Google foo here, and I'm going to find out. If you can come to those answers, there's so much documentation. Okay, well, I don't know the vendor, but I do know that there's a place I can go for vendor documentation. Well, that's a good start. I need to know, what do you currently have? Because then, you know what I'm saying? Can you apply that critical thinking?
Absolutely. Now, I want to talk about something that I think everyone who is making the leap to tech comes across. And, making a career change from really any different field into tech can really seem overwhelming. There's a lot of imposter syndrome going on and stuff like that. And I'm curious, what kind of guidance do you offer for someone who's looking to make this transition successfully, and particularly, again, don't have these technical skills?
You got to stifle I am not the person to talk to about imposter syndrome, because I have it every day. Yeah, I mean, and that might seem weird, for somebody that's been in the industry for a while, but I get to meet so many, like your story with Cisco. You get to meet people like these that have more experience, in their one hand, in some kind of networking technology than you have. I really think that one of the things is just, remain humble.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know if that answers the question, but
no, it does. I think because that's really important too. One thing, so going back to my story here, I don't want to stand on my soapbox this whole time, but
it's okay.
So when I got this job, that I have now, I got hired on as a network technician, a NOC technician for this ISP, and it was a weird transition because they had just let go of someone, and it really was just me. And I wasn't necessarily running the NOC, but, my boss at the time, he's like, here's your credentials. I can either hold your hand or I can just let you loose, and you just have to promise me not to break production. And I'm like, oh, let me go do some digging. And I just made it my mission to know everything there was to know about the network operations center in entirety. We're not just talking about servers and routers and switches. We're talking about HVAC. We're talking about the backup generator. We're talking about DC plant. Like, I just drilled down into it. And, over my first 3 months, 90-day probation, I just took complete ownership. And, I got called into my boss's office, for my 90-day review. It was more like, 120, whatever. And he's like, you've really taken complete ownership of this network operations center. You've done everything I've asked you to do. And I don't think your job title properly represents what you're doing here. So I would like to make you director of network operations. And, it just goes to show you, like, this is someone that came in like, man, I don't know Juniper. I don't know nothing about this. I am not good enough. And just having that level of determination just to do the best I could, it really paid off in the long run. And, 3 years into my career, I hit that 20-year goal of becoming a network admin. I overshot it. I became a director of network operation. So I have imposter syndrome every single day. I shouldn't, because I'm, been in that role now for over 3 years and I'm doing great and love it. But, you're going to have imposter syndrome always.
I believe so too.
Yeah.
I really do. Go ahead.
And it's a good thing to have, because you have to constantly be learning and developing your skills in this field, because it is evolving so fast. The moment you stop learning and caring about what's going on, you're going to be falling behind and you're going to become irrelevant in the field. So, yeah, absolutely.
I think the same thing. When it comes to imposter syndrome, there's always going to be people, I think where I've gotten to a point in my life is knowing that, there's millions of people out there that can explain it or do something a lot better than I can. But you have to kind of silence it, learn to silence it. Like I said, I think it's good to have a level of humility. Like I said, I've met a lot of people, while I've been into IT and, just being in the training industry, and, these people got a lot of skills, and if you can, kind of, I don't want to say you can rest on your skills that you have, but I think it's good to just every once in a while check your ego at the door. I think it helps out.
Well, that brings me to my next topic I want to talk about. There is an overwhelming amount of information available for IT careers and people in the industry, which can be really quite daunting and overwhelming. You got everyone yelling at you, oh, you got to learn this, you got to learn that. And one week I'm being told I need to learn Python. The next week I'm being told I got to learn, this other technology. What advice do you offer someone that, is trying to navigate through all this noise and this nonsense out there, to be honest with you, sometimes, how do they figure out, that voice to listen to?
Yeah, that can be a difficult one. Really, I would say fortunate, because you really had to look for the information when I came in, to the industry. And today with things like, social media and YouTube, all great, great things. I would say, find your trusted sources, narrow it down to a handful. Like, there's plenty of sources on YouTube that are great. At the end of the day, what you're trying to do, again, is learning the basic language, and while I do tote certification, I kind of tout the certification route because I do believe in them. I don't think that the say-all of what it takes to get you into the industry, but I would look at sources for training. It does, and define your goals. I think really is what's going to happen, because there are when you say IT, when you say computing, what does that mean? And like you said, it's such a broad brushstroke, right? Exactly. You have to focus, like say, what is it that I think that I want to do, and stay away from the 30-minute keywords, right? The buzzwords, right? Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I do think I use AI and stuff like that. And yes, I think you should look into stuff like that too. But remember that I would say focus, at least on the beginning, the stuff that's been around for a long time. I think you mentioned it early on. A network is still a network. Doesn't matter if it's sitting in the rack and stack and the Blinky's behind me, or it's halfway around the world in somebody else's data center. At the end of the day, it all follows the same, the same technology. So I would focus really on those entry-level type offerings. And again, there's a lot of them out there. I'm kind of biased. I would say, come look for me. But in the industry, you've got a lot of them out there. Like I really like Mike Myers. He's been one of my favorite, kind of go-tos in the industry.
Mike's an awesome person. Yeah.
Yeah, I've hung out with him before. I got the pleasure of at one of the CompTIA partner conferences, hanging out with him and talking to him. He's a really down-to-earth guy. And he's just another one, you know, I don't want to speak for the man, but if you watch enough of him, you'll see that he loves it. He loves what he does. He loves technology. And I think somebody like that's definitely a good source to go to when it comes to, you know, again, there's so many of them out there, and I don't want to detract from anybody, but, you know, start with just a couple of trusted sources like that, just to throw a couple of them out there. Look at a couple of, you know, maybe you've got a couple of people that you can look at different books that they author, and you can find them as well, too. Don't overlook free resources, because I know everybody's on a budget. It'd be nice to say, hey, money's not an option. Well, then you can pretty much choose whatever you want. That's not the reality
Yeah.
That's not the reality of it today. So if you are on a budget, understand that there are budget options. You know, we've kind of mentioned, you know, the fact that you can do home labs today. Well, follow that documentation. Go out there and get you a server operating system from the Microsoft Download Center, right? It's 180 days, it's valid. And Microsoft, you know, as much as I pick on them, I love Windows, you know, but I pick on them all the time. You know,
Yeah.
I really like, you know, a lot of the infrastructure and stuff, products. If you download a server operating system and install it, you look at the documentation that's built into it, you will have enough information right there for free to learn, and it will take you years to potentially to learn that. So there's a lot of good information out there that's free. Again, define your goals, and I think that's what's going to help you, because there is so much noise out here, and if you don't really have that direction, you really are just kind of like this ship at sea, you know, no lights, no sail, right? But
Exactly.
if you can get that at least that initial focus, right, you know, of what you want to do, I think that's going to be tremendously helpful.
While we're on the topic, and before I get to the next question, you know, if people want to connect with you, if they want to watch your study, if they want to become your next stalker, where can they go find you?
Oh, well, I've been doing stuff over the last few months more for a hobby. I mean, they can find me. You can email me at wsbryan1@gmail.com. That's my same channel, too. I've got a little series up there. I got like 60 videos up there of, it's called Shut Up, Just Show Me. And that's kind of the goal behind it. You hear a lot of people jabbering on, and, you know, I will show you step by step how to build a lab. I'll show you how to do it in Hyper-V. I'll show you how to do it in VirtualBox. I'm working on one in VMware, configuring all the servers, installing all the servers, configuring the switches and the networks, right? And we're not going to take time explaining it, right? Yeah, I'm going to have text scrolling across the screen, and it's going to take you, in a few videos, you can have your own lab ready to go. And that's really what I focus on. It's kind of a hobby more than it is anything for me. And there'll be more going up there as I've kind of said, hey, what do I do every day that maybe I can share with somebody else, you know, that I kind of take for granted, because I do so much content design. I have to build infrastructures, you know. I have to get everything ready. I have to build up the cloud infrastructures. And I'm like, you know what? What if I just stepped away for a second and just recorded some of this and handed it over? So it's really a hobby, and we'll get to see how far it'll go. But I'm on Facebook, and I'm also on LinkedIn as well, too. You guys can follow me there. I love to connect. I'm working on right now building up a community. I just kind of have to get my ears out there and figure out what some people might need help with.
Awesome. And we'll definitely make sure and link up to all of those resources and stuff down in the description below.
Sure.
If you could only give one piece of advice to someone looking to start this career, and it could be something that we've not talked about or we already covered, what would that one piece of advice be?
It still goes back to that, like my instructor told me, treat it like a hobby. If you're going to get into IT and it truly is a passion, then if it can be like a hobby, you know, and you always, like me, I'm literally, once we get done here, I'm going to go fire up Packet Tracer, and I'm going to be looking at some routers, because I'm a geek like that. But if you can do something like that where you just have that passion for it, and you're like, hey, I don't know how this works, but man, I really want to know. That determination is going to set you apart, you know, and it's also going to give you the skill. Don't be afraid to fail. That's not something I've said. It's so hard, you know, darn it, you only gave me one, right? But I think the other thing, you know, it kind of comes back to imposter syndrome. Don't be afraid to fail, because that's where you learn.
I said one, not three, okay?
Okay.
I'm just kidding. So
make it a hobby, and we'll go with that one.
No, I'm just kidding, yeah.
This is the short version. Do you, great kisser, you're married. I mean, it's a great day when you can quote Spaceballs.
Absolutely. Well, again, I really appreciate you taking the time, you know, to come on the channel and share so much great knowledge. I'd love to have you back again in the future.
Oh, most definitely. I'd love to come back here, and anytime I can lend, a hand to your community, anybody, I'm here to support. It's what I've been doing for, a very long time. If you got people that, need help in the industry or trying to get into the industry, that's what the community I'm a part of.
That's awesome. Well, everyone, again, thank you for tuning in. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time, keep learning.